Hi, Lee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, for the listeners, Dr. Lee Cordell is an expert anti-shame coach and CEO and founder of the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety. Lee uses her 15 plus years of experience in healthcare, psychology, and education to help her professional and entrepreneurial clients release shame and prioritize pleasure as a path to trusting themselves and to call in what they desire. And the mission, right? The overall mission is to empower people in the development of safe, healthy, and shame-free personal and professional relationships. I love that.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, oh God, where do we begin? Where do you want to begin?
It's like you say shame and people are like,
You're like,
that's
dun, dun,
like
dun,
it's a
dun.
lot. Like it's a lot, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Like, it's like clunk, shame.
Yes.
Okay, what do we do with this huge thing? Yeah. What interested you in working with shame specifically?
Oh, no one has ever asked me this question, which is now that you're asking me this, I'm like, why has no one ever asked me this question? Do I know the answer to this? Um, you know, so what happened for me was as like so many women out there, right? Experienced a life that was very filled with shame. And it was like the water I was swimming in, right? Like it was the milieu in which I was just birthed and programmed and all the things.
Yes.
And didn't know that, right? Just knew there were parts of myself that I really didn't like that I would try to cut off and hide and pretend weren't there and like make myself into the good girl and become the nurse doctor and like do all the things right. And oh goodness, probably about like 2-3 years ago, I realized I was really enjoying through all of the things I was doing professionally. I was in network marketing, I was working as a professor, I was working at the bedside as a clinician. I was doing all these things and I realized that I really loved coaching people, but I didn't like coaching people in the normal way that people coach people, right? Like I liked cheerleading people, but I really loved when people would like tell me the things, when I could get people to tell me the things that they wouldn't tell anybody else, right?
Yes.
And I loved being like, great, cool, like that's all you got, awesome. I loved providing that space for people. And this was kind of, I recognize this more in hindsight, right? But I noticed that that was the common theme that was going through everything I was doing. And what I also noticed at that time is that was the one thing I wasn't really doing for myself, right? Is I was providing this space where people could be like deep and dark and twisty, and like literally I would have people come in and to the hospital and I could get them to tell me things that the doctors like, they didn't tell me that. And I'm like, I know, right? They didn't feel safe telling you that.
Yeah.
But I didn't have, there were like those parts of myself that I really didn't feel comfortable showing to anyone else. And I was actually going through a program by Carolyn Elliott. It was called Wealth, and she talked a lot about existential kink and like getting off on your shame.
Yes.
And I was like,
Yes.
hold on a second. And I realized I'd like been kind of getting off on like helping other people get off on their shame, but like I wasn't getting off on my own shame. I was like, oh, it's fine for me to give that permission slip to everybody else, but like not myself, right?
Yeah.
So as I started doing that work, which that body of work itself is a little problematic, but like the core fundamental piece of that work for me, the part that I took out of it that was good was, I really get to stop shaming myself. I get to start giving myself a lot of permission slips. And then also by me giving myself that permission slip, I can like take this mission even bigger, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not experiencing any shame, then it's a lot easier to tell other people to, or like give permission slips to other people to not experience shame.
Yeah. Just by your vibe.
Yeah. Right. And so, and plus I had a background in neurobiopsych. So I really was interested in how the brain and the body the mind, the soul, like all talks to each other and how they influenced one another. And so when I started doing this anti-shame work, I was like, oh my gosh, this ties so much of that together. Like why we do the things we do as humans is shame is an evolutionary process. It's the thing we use to create communities, right? And so shame's actually not always, I don't want to, like, it's not always bad. It's just the way that we've learned to use it as a society is bad. And so as I started like just diving in more and, you know, doing my typical nerdy nurse thing, reading about all of this, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, is just like blowing the lid off of shame, both for myself and really like experiencing that deep level of healing and acceptance, and then turning around and like helping other people do the same thing.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you said, well, there's so many places I want to go. I remember when I had a previous conversation with you on your podcast, you talked about the different types of shame, and I want to bring those in because it's really important for us to like begin to break it down, right? To begin to really see like how this roots into different areas of our life. Yeah.
So I think you can look at shame in a couple different ways, right? We can look at shame in, so we can look at how shame is placed on us, and then we can look at how, when shame is inside of us, how we then act, right?
Yes.
So shame is placed on us from a lot of different places, right? So shame is basically saying, if you think about shame being a tool for conformism, right? So whatever the morals, the values, the ideals of the society are, we use shame to get people to mold themselves to that, right?
Yes.
Which is why younger generations oftentimes look at older generations and go, why are you guys embarrassed about this? Like, you know, when older generations see younger generations, like my grandmother, when she used to see me not wearing pantyhose, like would almost faint, right?
Yes.
That was a shameful act to her. If she had not worn pantyhose, she would have been like cast out, right? She would have had, you know, and that's just a tiny example, right? But we take that to gender and sexual orientation, and we take that to race and to ethnicity and to all of the places, right? All of the identities that we hold, and every identity that we hold based on current society has a way that is okay to show up and a way that's not okay to show up.
Yeah.
So shame is very individualized, but it's also very collective from a societal standpoint.
Yeah.
Right.
Historically based and collective.
Yes, it's very historically based and collective. And there are individuals who don't experience shame the same way that a lot of the collective does, because they were raised differently or because whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the cool, like that. That's the cool part. Again, nerd here. The cool part about shame is like, we can make generalizations about how we would expect that people would internalize shame, and every single human has a different experience. And so some people internalize shame differently than others. Yeah. Even siblings, right? We have different personalities. So when we look at how we externalize the results of shame, there's 4 different ways that we typically do this. So the first way that people, if they're feeling shame about something, they are going to it's going to affect how they outwardly treat others, and it's going to affect how they inwardly treat themselves.
Okay. Say more about that.
Yeah. So shame can affect how I externally or outwardly connect with others, either by having me cut myself off from other people, right? I'm not worthy of connecting. I'm not good enough to be in this relationship. Like I'm going to actually avoid connection with other humans, because if they get to know me, they're going to see my shame, and my shame is very, very bad. And they're going to abandon me, reject me, leave me, make fun of me, hurt me, whatever. Yeah.
And it's like, it's not even that conscious sometimes. It's like,
no,
if I don't want people to get close to me, because if they do, they will know I'm bad. right?
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
there may not even be awareness that it's shame, but it's like they will see and know that I am bad at my core.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the if they only knew, right?
Yes. Yes.
And this is actually where a lot of imposter syndrome comes from is
Oh,
um you know, yeah, I know that it looks like I've got everything together on the outside. I've got all these degrees, I've got all these accolades, I've got, this
yeah.
experience, but like if they only knew,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So there's that piece. The other way we externalize is we fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody says something that maybe is even meant neutrally or positively to us,
Yeah.
like, oh wow, like you really like crushed it up there, right?
Yeah.
If I have a shame about being visible, if I have shame about, shining too brightly because that was
Yeah.
something that I was made to feel shame about, I might either pull away, like we just talked about, or I might actually lash out at this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I might be like, well, what do you mean by that? And then they're like,
Right.
whoa, dude, like just a compliment, not
So there'll be
not
a
a
suspiciousness there. There'll be a suspiciousness of like, what do you mean by that? Because
yeah,
the person is already feeling some sort of way about it and they can't receive the accolade as it is. It's kind of like there's an ulterior motive in there. There's something
yeah.
that's not quite landing. Okay.
Yes. It's and both of these are states of hypervigilance, right? Like where we
Yes.
are our nervous system is like very attuned to, can I get hurt here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Shame is painful. That's the other thing about shame is shame hurts. Like if you think of a moment that you've been deep right now, if it feels safe for you, like think
Yeah.
of a moment where you have been deeply embarrassed,
Hmm.
like felt ashamed for who you were, right? Because shame is about who we are. Guilt is about what
Yeah.
we've done. Shame is about who we are.
Yes.
You think of that even right now, I can feel my stomach start contracting, like my
Yeah.
cheeks
It's
want
kind of
to,
yucky.
I want to blush. I want to like my, and when you feel that feeling underneath, when that feeling gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's really a feeling of like, I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
literally going to die.
Yes. Yes. Which is why we go through all lengths to avoid feeling it.
Exactly, which is why I'm going to fight you off, right? Because if I think you're even trying to shame me, I'm going to be like, back up, buddy.
Yeah.
Or I'm just not going to interact with you at all or I'm not going to do the things that I think might bring about shame
Mm-hmm.
because that it feels so awful. It's a feeling that we all want to avoid because think about like we're mammals.
Yeah.
We are made to be pack animals. We are made to connect and like thrive and survive based on being in relationship with other humans.
Yeah.
If I feel like I'm not accepted by the other humans, that is death. In
Yeah.
10,000 years ago, that would have been death.
Exactly. There's that evolutionary piece that feels like that's what we feel. We feel that that deep sense of ostracism and separateness, and by default, death. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. 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 And when I had somebody say that to me, like, it feels like you're dying. I was like, well, and then I really felt into it. I'm like, oh no, actually, not that I know what dying feels like, but from an emotional standpoint,
Yes.
it feels
Yes.
like a psychological death.
Like a withering, like just a
Yes.
crumbling and just collapsing into a
Yeah.
puddle or a
And
pile of
you've
something.
seen, and so this is why it is so fascinating to me now watching other humans, especially like over the last few years. Our society has started using shame a lot more to try
Hmm.
to and I don't even want to say that we're necessarily using it more, but it's easier to see, it's easier to spread, right? We have
Mm.
social media. I cannot even count the amount of times I've been in comment threads and read people saying to other people, you should be ashamed of yourself for saying that, thinking that, doing that, right?
Mhm.
Oftentimes political conversations.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes.
So we are using shame to try to get people to script back to what we think the norms are.
Yeah.
Except
Yeah.
the problem is that we're in a society where multiple different norms and values have developed. And so it's
Yeah.
like there's actually like we've almost gone back to a little bit of tribalism in some of these places of, if you can't see things the way I see things, then you're out.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for naming that. I really feel that too. And I've been feeling
Yeah.
a lot of like just a sense of distress around the polarization. Yeah.
Yes. So I distressed, I activated a lot of people the last political season because I was having conversations where I wasn't ascribing to a tribe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was having these like bigger conversations above going, can we look at what we're doing?
Yeah.
And people who were very um engrossed in that tribal mentality were like
Yeah.
not happy campers with me,
Yeah.
right? And that itself felt very hard. Like for me, there was a lot of like, do I feel shame here? Right.
Hmm.
And so one of the other ways that we internalize shame is we will start to like place rules and restrictions on ourselves to try to like conform to the norms. Right.
Yeah.
So my old self, before I had like really rid myself of a lot of this shame, there was this little piece of me that's like, oh my gosh, like people are unfriending me. My parents are like, oh my, we can't believe that you think this way. Like, I had a client that was like, yeah, I can't be your client anymore because we have different
Wow.
political values. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And it was almost a little bit of an ego death. It was me, like that piece of me that felt really shamed, got like had to die off. I had to be
Yeah.
like, okay, am I going to police myself back in? Am I going to stop speaking my mind? Am I going to not have this conversation? Am I going to pretend that I believe something when I'm with one group and then pretend to believe something else when I'm with another? Or am I willing to actually let this piece of me that feels shame around this, like go? Am I going to let that go?
Yeah.
Right? Am I going to accept myself at the
Hmm.
expense of being not accepted by others?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was so hard.
What
It
was
was
that like
so
for you?
hard.
Can you describe sort of what you experienced in your body?
Yeah, it was really um I mean, I did. There was a little bit, it actually kind of felt like I was dying a little bit. There was, okay, I'm going to take the post down, right? There was the internal, I'm going to police myself. I'm going to take the post down.
Mhm.
I'm going to go apologize to all of these people for saying what I said. And luckily I had done the work enough to know like, no, this is actually what you think. And you're speaking for a group of people that you know exist.
Right.
Because what was happening on the back end and the thing that helped me keep going was I was getting all of these private messages.
Ah, okay. Okay.
I was
Yes.
getting all of these private messages of people saying, oh my gosh, thank you for saying the thing. I don't feel safe saying the thing. And so it was, that helped to be like, okay, actually, there's this whole other community of people that feels like they're on the outskirts, that feels like they can't speak, that feels like they
Yeah.
can't have a conversation because these two polar opposites are so entrenched that that no one outside of their circles is accepted. And so there are a lot of people in this middle section just kind of swimming around going, well, like, where do we get to fit?
Yeah.
And so by kind of naming that, going, there's not just two camps here, right?
Right.
There's not just two camps here. And actually, y'all think a lot of the same things, and you're just not realizing you're thinking a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
By saying that, there was this whole group that kind of came out from the shamey shadows and was like, oh my gosh, hi, like, nice to meet you. Thank you so much. And so it made me realize that, this is what shame does. It silences us.
Yes. Yes. I love what you said about, and I'm sort of writing notes to
Yeah.
myself, the rules and the restrictions on yourself. That hit home for me,
Yeah.
right? The ways that we silence ourselves, the way that we then hide, right? We just,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't show up. We don't show up in our fullest self.
Yeah. And the thing was too, is the experience I had here around, you know, claiming that and really outing myself and saying like, hey, I don't fall in the camp you think I do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That experience politically and ideologically over there I was able to do that because I had already started doing that in other places, right?
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
was the terrifying one. That was the one like where all of the things that felt like if they happened, I would die happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Losing like I don't want to say financial stability, we were fine, but like losing income because
Yeah.
somebody disagreed with my beliefs, like that to me was like, wow, okay, this actually happens, right? But I had already kind of started doing this around my body, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I had taken a non-diet stance about a year ago and was putting pictures of my body on the internet and being like, this is the before and after picture you get, and it isn't what you think it's going to be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I had already started doing this around healthcare and saying, hey, you know, I'm in this system and I don't think what we're doing is actually healthy.
Yeah.
So I had already kind of started having these conversations where I was saying the things that before I felt like if I said them, I would get cut out, ostracized, I would die, and had already found some freedom and a lot of self-acceptance around that. And that's what allowed me to have like the even bigger, the big one.
I remember when you were on the internet doing the body challenge. I remember like watching it being like, oh my gosh, she's doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband, when he saw my one of my branding photos for my business, where I hired a boudoir photographer to do business branding photos, and he was like, okay. He's like, also, your dad's gonna see this. I'm like, well, he saw it 30 years ago, it's fine, like whatever, right? It looks a little different, but it's fine. Like, this is my body, right? Like, and me feeling liberated in my body, it's not just about me, but again, it's a permission slip for other humans to feel liberated as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that wholeheartedly. Yes. And what has been your experience around like being a multiracial woman, sexual shame, body shame?
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating because I was actually having this conversation with my husband the other day, talking about it's a little, I don't know how to say it. I feel a little disjointed sometimes, right? There's these three predominant cultures that ancestrally came together to create me as a human, and they're very different.
Yeah.
Right. They're the same in so many ways, but they're also very different. And one, the indigenous piece, the Cherokee piece, is one that it's very new to me. It's one that's newly discovered.
Yeah.
We shared this on the podcast, on my episode when you were, or your episode when you were on my podcast. My great uncle just recently told us, he said, yeah, your great grandmother was Cherokee. And I'm like, wait, what? He said, oh yeah, their whole family lineage claimed to be Black instead of Cherokee, so that they didn't have to go on the Trail of Tears. They picked slavery instead. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Genocide, slavery. I guess slavery's better, right? But like, still, those are your choices. So for me, there's a lot of different messages about my body and about sex and about the things.
Yes.
And the fascinating piece is that they all were restrictive.
Just in different ways.
Just in different ways, right? The one was modesty. We have to be modest.
Yeah.
And that wasn't just sexual. That was just in general, but especially from a sexual perspective, which was fascinating when I learned more about my family history, because I learned why modesty was esteemed as such a value, because there was a lot of shame tied up around some immodest things that had happened that are not my stories to share. But
there was like a correction that was made.
There was a correction that was made. And when I learned that, I was like, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense why modesty feels safe now. Right.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it was really it was almost the same. I mean, thinking about it now, same but different, right? Again, there was a correction that was made. And it was, hey, the immodest things that have happened in the past were unsafe. And so modesty, restriction, really like doing things in a certain way, the proper way, marriage, you know, religion, things like that. That is how you stay safe.
Yeah.
So I fully, you know, coming into this more liberated place from a sexual standpoint, I really have a lot of compassion for my people that came before me and why I learned what I did from them, because I understand that it really was a, hey, we're teaching you this. And this wasn't a conscious choice, right? But subconsciously, we're teaching you this because this is how you stay safe in the body that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't a, we think you're bad. It was a, society thinks what you're doing is bad and you're going to get hurt if you show up this way.
Yeah. And I love how you make that distinction. And in our bodies don't make that distinction.
No, my body
Right?
had no, my body was just like, okay, we're bad. Got it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't a, as a nearly 35-year-old, I can make that distinction now, right? I can understand what was happening, but as a teenager that, you know, started exploring sexually and then got the ramifications of that were not pleasant from a shame standpoint, you know, that really, there was no distinction in my body of like, oh, this is happening to protect you.
Yeah.
It was a, no, like, you're bad. This is bad.
Exactly. This cannot happen. Boom, right?
This cannot happen.
Yeah.
And so the last few years have been, just like I said, they've been really, really interesting for me because there is a lot of embodiment practice that's had to happen, right? Yeah. Being in a sexual situation and having to like, and noticing that like there's a part of my body that's numb, or there's a part of my body that's really tense and frozen up, or like I can't get out of my mind, my brain.
Yeah.
And very grateful for now having the practices to notice that, to become aware and be like, okay, you are safe. You are safe. This is safe. This is allowed. This is allowed to be enjoyable. Like all of this is okay.
Yeah.
And being able to do that. And there's even times where I've had to pause and be like, hold on, please. My brain is saying some things. I need to give it a moment to say the things and then tell it that we're safe and it's okay. And then we can come back. And luckily I've, you know, the situation I've been in, it's with people or someone who's very like, absolutely great. Do what you need.
Can you share an example for the listeners of just like how it came up and how you moved yourself through the process? Yeah.
So just an example would be like, with my husband, right? And he and I have been together for 17 years. This isn't a new relationship by any standard, right? We have 3 kids. This isn't a new thing, but I had been having a particularly like activating day, right? Some business stuff had come up, like some other things had come up, and I was laying in bed and, you know, we were just fooling around. And at one moment he was touching me and I was like, I could feel my entire abdomen just like tense up. Right. And before, what I learned is you're married, muscle through, right? Like you're married. This is like, you're in a relationship with him. This is how it's supposed to go, muscle through.
Yeah.
And he has been so supportive in the work that I've been doing that I felt safe enough to be like, I don't want to muscle through here. I want to take the 2 minutes and risk him feeling a little bit upset, risk him, you know, ostracizing me or whatever, knowing that's not going to happen. But there's a part of me that goes, oh, but what if it does? Right. And so I literally like I think I put my hand on his head and I was like, stop just for a second. I was like, you are doing nothing wrong. And I need a minute to get my body on board. And so it really was. And just having him be like, okay. And having him be accepting was enough to have my body go like, okay, we're good. Right.
Yeah.
And what I want to also say about this is that was a conversation that was like, I don't know, like 17 years in the making, right? That was a conversation that just a few short years ago, I would not have had. But doing the work that I had done to learn how to communicate my own needs, how to tell when I was safe, how to tell when the other person felt safe, to be able to say those things, like that was what allowed that situation to unfold. And one of the things I talk about my clients a lot, especially with sexual shame, right? Sexual shame is its own special form of shame.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, right. Sexual shame is its own special form of shame because actually sexual shame and financial shame are the two big shame situations that people I see the most shame around. Because they're the two things that we don't talk about.
Yes. Like the most taboo. Yeah.
Politics used to be, not so much anymore. So like sex and money.
Yeah.
Those are the things we don't talk about those with our parents.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have the conversations we have are like hush hush back room things. And so like sexual shame, when I talk to my clients about this, I say, look, we don't have the conversation about shame about sex in the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
We have the conversation about sex and how we want things to go and how we want to feel seen and feel heard and the things that we might end up doing. Like we had a conversation of like where I'd said, hey, if I ever feel uncomfortable, I'm going to begin stopping you.
Yeah.
So that I can make sure I'm fully on board every single time. And he was like, obviously I want that. Right.
Yeah. And think about like, I can remember times where I didn't stop a partner because if I did, right, then all of these stories would come up, and all the stories had some version of making myself wrong. Like, oh, like, why isn't this okay with you? Or like, why? And that sort of this harsh questioning of myself. And like, yeah, that centered around, doubting that I could give myself that permission.
Yeah. And the other hard part about sexual shame is that there's almost always two or more people involved, right?
Yeah.
So other forms of shame, they're all about connection and how we're going to be perceived about people. But sexual shame is a special kind of shame because you are intimately involved with another individual who's bringing their own shame to the table as well. And this isn't like a casual interaction we're having. This is a intimate interaction where being in a sexual interaction with somebody is the most vulnerable we can really get, especially as women. Right. So there's an extreme amount of vulnerability because, and this is a generalization, but for most women who are in heteronormative relationships with men, if that man wanted to, he could do what he wanted to by force, right? Now, again, generalization, but so from an evolutionary perspective for women, this is one of the most vulnerable times. Like our bodies remember that. Right. If you're with a partner that's stronger than you, then you're not, you are theoretically in control. And at some point you could lose that control. Right. So yes, I'm with my husband. Yes, it feels safe. Yes, he is a very safe human. And my body remembers situations that it's been in with humans that weren't safe. So having that conversation outside of the bedroom with my husband saying, when this happens, it's not about you, was really important. So that he could have his feelings about it, right? He could work through his own thing, because what I don't want, what we fear is when we say stop, one of the things that came up was, he's going to think I don't want to be with him. He's going to think he's done something wrong. He's going to this is going to fracture our intimate connection.
I'm just, as you say that, I'm feeling like, we feel our own shame, we feel our sense of wrongness in bringing it up because we don't want to shame the other person either. Right. So this, like,
Exactly.
you talked about that interactional piece around shame, like each person bringing their shame story into the sexual interaction. And here's how it's sort of playing out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this directly ties to the polyamory piece. We aren't. And I have clients who are.
Yeah.
And they're like, it was so fascinating to me that I thought bringing another human into the mix was going to make this easier. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, like we could have had a whole conversation about that. Right. But it goes to what you said, is everyone's bringing in everyone's bringing in their own backpack of shame.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're all at different levels of unpacking the backpack. Right.
Mhm.
Some of us have like little tiny knapsacks with like one piece of shame in them at this point, and then others of us are like, here's my 3-piece luggage, like, and not that either one of those humans is better than the other, right? It's just knowing that is what's happening is really helpful. So when people do things like snap at neutral statements, or suddenly start avoiding, right?
Yeah.
Or we meet them and they're very regimented and restricted about how they do things, right?
Yeah.
When we start to see this, we go, oh, what's in your backpack?
Exactly. That we can sort of bring it into the conversation. And sometimes we're not even aware that it's shame that's driving this whole behavior. Right. We'll justify it. We'll externalize it through judgment of other people. Right. Shame is often externalized that way.
Oh, one of the huge places I see it, I know in myself and a lot of the people I interact with, is in parenting. Right.
Yeah. Oh.
I know. So I have the hardest, and she and I have actually had very honest conversations around this. And I'm really big on consent with my kids, being as open as I am. Like if I'm going to talk about them, they're going to give me consent. So she's consented to me having this. I just want to say that. But my nearly 12-year-old, like we've had a conversation of why she is the hardest one for me to personally parent. Yeah. And it's because she's so like me when I was younger. And my inclination is to parent the me out of her.
So true.
I'm like, and it's because there's this little inner wounded child inside of me going, if you show up that way, you're going to get hurt. So just let's stop. Right. But unfortunately, I'm a much bigger adult talking to a not fully reasonable, rational, logical person at this point. Yeah. And I end up actually shaming her when in reality, I'm trying to prevent her from feeling shame.
Yes. Oh.
And it's so messy. It's so messy, right?
Yes. And I want to share, just like backing up what you just said. My oldest and I had an interaction. She's 10 and she was like getting dressed and she wanted to leave the house wearing something that I was like, whoa, girl. And I just surprised myself by like wanting to just crack down and be like, hell no, you're not leaving the house like that. And I was trying to like, oh, let me see how I can explain this. But it really was coming from that place of like, I don't want you to get hurt. Like, really, I don't want you to get hurt. And it was coming out of shame. And I was like, ooh, like, and trying to figure out like, how do I do this without shaming her? And I did my best, but I still think I shamed her. And we had a conversation about it afterwards, but it was so challenging.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. So my oldest she's just messy. She's and she's messy. She is an artist to her core. All of her clothes have paint marks on them. Or Sharpie. Like she's always drawing on her body. We had to get her body markers. So like I was like, I was like, maybe not the Sharpies, but like here, right?
Yeah.
She is the most creative little thing I've ever seen. And I'm so immensely like just proud and also surprised that that human came out of me. Right.
Yeah.
And I was taught to keep things nice, neat,
Neat.
orderly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I see her doing things that are messy, my internal warning system just goes right off. I'm like, right.
Yeah.
And so I'm parenting her from a place that like, I don't even agree with. She's not technically even doing anything wrong. Right. And so luckily I have this very wonderful man who is also messy. Right.
Yeah.
Who is like, helps me see, okay, you're not having a problem with the mess. You're having a problem with what the mess represents. Right.
Yes.
And so we've come up with some really great rules now. Like her room is a mess. It's a total mess. And there's actually, another reason I love this kid. And also she just completely like enrages me is because again, we're the same human. She brought me studies, articles on how people with ADHD and people with artistic creative brains actually can find things easier in messy rooms. She's like, Mom, I'm going to be less likely to lose things if you let me keep my room messy. And I'm like over here, just like literally
holding on,
speechless. Right. My husband's looking at her and looking at me and looking at her. And he's just got this big smile on his face.
Yeah,
he's like, this
yeah.
is great. This is so great. He's like, you're literally the same person. But I realized like, this is part of the shame work too, and I'm so glad that I get to do this, that I got to do this work before my kids got to the teenage phase.
Yeah.
Because I'm very open and honest with her. If I feel like I've shamed her, I come back and I'm like, that didn't feel good, did it? She's like, nope. I'm like, great. So let's actually have a conscious conversation, like where you get to participate in making choices.
Yeah.
And this is a completely different type of parenting than I experienced, right? But we can't parent our kids the same way. We can't parent our kids the same way as we were parented, especially if shame was used, because it doesn't work.
No. Yeah. And what I was going to say about the situation with my daughter that I missed telling the first time was, she was innocently gonna walk out. She thought she looked great. She was so proud of herself, right? She was feeling herself. And I was wanting to crack down on that. And I think that is what a lot of women in particular have experienced around our bodies, where we're feeling ourselves. We're feeling like yummy or even just beautiful or powerful. And because someone wants to protect us from getting hurt and stepping out with that energy into the world and having, the wrong kinds of attention on us, it gets cracked down. And nobody ever says it's because of all of these other things that I'm trying to protect you. It's not you.
Yeah.
And so that is a way that our sexual innocence is cracked down on. And we're like, this radiance that we naturally have gets made gets tempered, gets restricted.
Yeah. I wonder what it would look like if we changed that conversation. Because I saw Sandra Bullock actually have this conversation. I don't remember what show she was on, but she was talking about her son that she adopted is Black. And she was talking about how when he was wearing a hoodie, she was saying you can't wear that out like this because of society. And actually the really interesting conversation that was happening in the comments was by a lot of other Black people saying, but what message are we teaching our kids with that? Like, I get that we're trying to protect them, but also we're teaching them that the world is a very scary place. And there is truth to that, but how much perpetuation occurs by us continuing to teach. It was this very, very fascinating conversation. And I can't even pretend to tell you where I fall in there. Like, I was watching all sides going like, yes, but also yes, and yes. Right. And I wonder if we had a different kind of conversation. I wonder if we had a conversation where we taught our children to recognize what actual threat looked like. Right. And again, this is just purely my musing. I don't know that this is the right answer. I don't know there is a right answer. But if we started having a conversation around like, look, I want you to be safe. And you get to make conscious choices about how you go out into the world. And you also, I want you to be aware and alert without also being afraid. Because when we teach our kids to be afraid, this is actually a really dangerous thing to do. It's dangerous to teach people to be afraid, because if you are taught to fear something, the way you act in response to that thing is not going to be reasonable or rational.
Right. Right.
And so in terms of shame, you know, I know that the answer isn't to, you know, crack down and say like, absolutely not, which by the way, I don't know. I've had this I've shared this places. I used to walk, our bedrooms are upstairs and we had this like grand staircase that like led right next to the kitchen. I would walk down the steps. My father would look me up, look me down, go yes or no. And then I'd know if I had to go back up the steps, right?
Wow.
Again, I'm not blaming my father. I know what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
I know based on his experience and our past why that was happening. There's zero anything negative directed at him. And that still caused internalized shame.
Of course, we're like punishing vulva owners for a patriarchal problem.
Exactly. We're punishing these little Black boys who just want to wear a hoodie outside.
Yes.
Because the world is a scary place and big bad people are going to get you. And so it's like, and this is honestly why, you know, at the Institute, we're doing work on, we really want to help individuals release shame and learn how to be more trauma informed towards themselves more than anything, right? Which is a huge part of shame work, is learning that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
A lot of what you feel is because of what happened to you, not who you are, right?
Yeah.
But a bigger part of our work is actually, we're from a systemic standpoint of how do we change these systems?
Yeah.
How do we start to have different conversations collectively so that we don't have to have the you can't wear a hoodie outside conversation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I love that. I'm at a loss for words right now. There's just so many things popping off. How do you get people to, because shame is so hard to feel sometimes. How do you make people aware, or how do you move people through shame?
I think the biggest thing with shame is the exercise we did at the beginning, right? Where I was like, think of a time you're embarrassed. If anyone listened to that and didn't have a moment pop up, please find my email in the comments and message me and prove me wrong, because everyone's like, I was 6, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was 12.
Yeah.
I was standing in the kitchen, right? Like, that memory is burned into your brain. It's in your body.
Yeah.
So that is where I start with people, is then I'm like, okay, and I want you to think about, like, if that is a 10 out of 10, what are some of the 8 out of 10s? What are some of the 6 out of 10s? Like, and as we start to do that, and they start to like be able to feel that more, they start interacting with their world on a daily basis, and they're like, oh, there's a 2 out of 10, a little bit of shame there. Right? Like, oh, I just walked to the grocery store and my kid was yelling and the woman gave me a side eye. Yep. 3 out of 10 right there.
Got it. Just attuning to the sensation, giving it putting it on a scale, and having them observe.
Starting to do that. And it's fascinating. People are like, I never realized how many situations.
Yes. Thank you.
I feel that in, right?
Yeah.
So the awareness is huge, and it's a body-based awareness. So much of what we do, we're so cute as humans. Like, we try to make it all about our brain and about our thinking. And I'm like, no, like, we are mammals. we are walking meat sacks with a prefrontal cortex. That is what we are. Like, we are not as evolved as we think.
Yeah.
So much is feeling. And so if you can start feeling your body again, your body's going to give you so many answers to what's going on. Right.
Exactly.
And I honestly don't remember what the first part of your question was. That was the awareness.
It was just like, how do you move people through the process?
Yeah.
You make them
So,
aware.
so the moving through the acceptance piece, my clients actually, they're like, it is so weird because I will tell you the like deepest, darkest, awful thing. And you're like, great. And they're like, that's it. I'm like, yeah, awesome. What else you got? Right.
Yeah.
So there's the attunement piece. And this is one of the things we teach in our certification is like how to attune to someone else. And attunement is where you give somebody undivided attention and unconditional acceptance.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So acceptance is different than approval.
Say
You
how.
telling me, yeah. So you telling me that you significantly hurt somebody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can accept, yes, that happened. I hear you. I see you. I witness you without saying, and that was a good thing or a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm accepting, yep, that happened. Yep, that's how you feel. Yep, that's what you're thinking. Yep, those are the signs your body's sending you without placing judgment in one way or the other on
Got
it.
it. Got it. Okay.
So it is when you can do that for another human and you can really do it, right? Because I will tell you, I have had some people tell me some things, right? And I'm like, okay, give me a minute. Give me a second.
Right.
I'm going to take a second. I say this, I look at them dead in the eyes and I say, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to like feel that. Okay. And they're like, okay. And then I do. And I'm like, great. Okay. Thank you for that. So seeing and hearing you in this. So tell me more, right? When I can feel confident in my animal body, right? When I can stay grounded and regulated in my body. And when I get out of that, take a moment, acknowledge it and be like, let me get regulated again.
Right. There's the animal body piece. And then there's also the unconditional acceptance, which is the heart piece.
It is. So yeah. So we just don't realize how much our bodies talk to one another while our words are, doing whatever.
Distracting.
So what's interesting is people have been talking about mask wearing, right? And they're like, I can't, they're like, oh, masks are so awful because we're not going to be able to understand or feel or be able to we can't see smiles or frowns. And while that is true, it does have an effect. Do you know how much you can tell from someone's eyes and their eyebrows?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. What you can tell from seeing their neck and their chin. There are like, I can't even remember how many, but there's like over 100 like micro cues that you can get from somebody from their collarbones up. Yeah. So if you can learn how to control those, how to relax those, it's really relaxation. If you can learn how to relax those while you're listening to somebody telling you some really hard things, that creates safety for that other human. Yeah. And from there, and this is why people are like, oh, video, like I can't connect with, I'm like, you can absolutely connect with your clients over video. You just need them from the shoulders up. You don't even have to see their whole body. Exactly. So if you can learn how to regulate and ground in your own body in that way and hold space for somebody, you could say all the wrong things. Yeah. Yeah. And their body would still be like, yeah, this is still a safe human. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you would have to ground in that safety for you to then be able to communicate that energetically, right? Like the way that we feel each other.
Like, yes. And so this is, I actually wrote a post about this today. I said, being a leader, being a manager, being a parent, being anyone who leads anyone is very, very hard. And the way that we teach people how to lead is we teach them the words, we teach them nonviolent communication, we teach them body posture, right? Like make sure that you're mirroring them, make sure you're relaxed. We don't have I never took a single course until very recently about from your collarbones up.
Exactly. Yeah. My whole doctoral training never talked about really the nervous system and how calibrate it in order to communicate safety so that people can bring their shame stories and have them dissolve in the presence of unconditional acceptance.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really cool thing to see, because most of the time people come to me, they've got their barriers up, right? They're like, I don't know if you're safe. I think you're safe, but like, I don't know. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are times where I have shown up and I have not been in that kind, caring, compassionate, universal acceptance space. Like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm whatever.
Yeah.
And the cool part is, though, is that as you start to do this work more and more, as you start to learn your own body more and more, you catch the cues and you're like, ooh, wait, I'm not regulated at all. Let me fix that.
Yeah.
And then you like can snap yourself out of situations where you're like, oh, that's not the way I wanted to show up towards that human. And also you can really I use the word manipulate. A lot of people say that has a negative connotation, but that's all we're doing.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing is manipulating each other. So you can really manipulate conversations and situations in such better, more mutually beneficial directions when you can catch yourself in that dysregulated state that almost always shame has triggered.
Yeah. Yeah. We can manage ourselves, right? We can manage ourselves and shift our energy, which is a form of manipulation, but it is sort of the positive end of like, oh, I'm feeling this. I can move the energy down into my legs, or I can ground into my seat. We can manage ourselves. We can move things around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been so fascinating.
Yeah.
So fascinating to just like watch the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. This is such a rich conversation. We really, it got broad, it got specific. We opened it up again and we got intense, and I love it. This is so wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I want the listeners to know how they can contact you, how they can know more about the work that you do.
Sure. So we just launched our official website, which is very exciting. Labor of Love, right? It's the institutefortrauma.com. You can find our free Facebook group on there, Becoming Trauma Informed. We have our teacher training and our trauma informed psychologically safe certification information on there. And there's a little box if you want to connect with me personally. You can just fill out and it'll go straight to my email, and we can connect.
Wonderful. And you also have like a Instagram.
Yes. It's Becoming Trauma Informed is the Instagram. And then the Facebook group is Becoming Trauma Informed. It's Becoming Trauma Informed, creating safer, shame-free spaces. There's another group we realized that also is called Becoming Trauma Informed, but look for the one with the Institute on it and you'll find us. So
wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Okay.